Yup, and welcome back to Talkin Knicks. BBD in the house with Tom Piccolo and Kenny Poon, and we're here to talk some Knicks. Since we last spoke, Marcus Morris came in the fold, Bullock became official, Summer League wrapped up. The Knicks did something stupid. We're going to talk about all of that. Let's talk Knicks. All right, welcome back to Talkin Knicks. Sorry we missed you last week due to technical difficulties. So it actually turned out to be kind of a good thing because not much has changed in the world of the Knicks. I don't know where we want to start, fellas, but
I think
do you want to go to Knicks controversy or the Marcus Morris thing? Where we leaning?
I want to start by knowing, how was your last 2 weeks, Big Baby David? That's what I want to know.
Oh, that's true. That is a good point. Got to do the hi, how are yous? Yeah, my last 2 weeks have been good. It was my birthday almost 2 full weeks ago, so that was a fun time for me. Been doing a lot of hanging out, doing a lot of nothing. We had the Talkin Yanks event this past week, which was fun, even though we had rain, but I was there for that. Yankees have been playing well, so that makes me happy. And been watching a lot of Barry lately. Since last night.
And Dave, are you talking about the number 2 podcast in all of sports podcasts, Talkin Yanks? Is that the one you're talking about?
Did they pass
precisely
Lance Armstrong?
They did.
Yeah, and then
Lance.
Lance actually came back and jumped us again. But
damn,
classic Lance.
He gets to the Alps. He gets to the Alps, and then he just passes more people.
A lot of
I didn't realize Lance Armstrong had a podcast going, but good for Lance.
Yeah, doing well too.
Yeah. How you guys doing? Have your fortnights been?
I haven't played any Fortnite ever in my life. Last weekend, my twin brother and his wife had a baby shower. They're going to be having a daughter in September. So, I'm going to be an uncle. So that was exciting. I had a bunch of family in town for that. Saw some friends. So that was good. And then this weekend, I actually saw Kenny at a surprise birthday party for one of our buddies from high school turned 30. So we were back in our hometown celebrating with a bunch of high school friends. Jake was there, trying not to make a fool of himself. So
did not succeed.
No. We had a great time. Good couple weekends though.
That's good, Kenny.
Yeah, I think Tom took most of my talking points, but so last weekend I was not on the pod because I was at a wedding the night before for my cousin. What's up? Shout out Michael. Party kind of raged. I was sharing a bedroom with my younger brother, Greg, also on the podcast. My older brother was supposed to stay in the room with my parents, but decided at 4 a.m. that he was going to stay in our room instead, and just jumped in the bed that I was sleeping in. So started throwing elbows in the middle of the night. I did not sleep enough and ended up sleeping through the podcast. That's why I wasn't here last week, guys. Tough break.
That is a tough one.
But he had a kid like 2 days ago, so we'll forgive him for keeping me up.
That's right. Kenny's older brother had a son, so Kenny is he's been an uncle for a while, but he has a new nephew. How exciting! Man, the family's just, and he's gonna be a Talkin Knicks listener and a Knicks fan, so the family just keeps expanding.
Yeah, my family and the pod family.
I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm just saying what you're saying.
BBD, tell us what we should be saying now.
All right, well. We're going to do a few quick hitters today, fellas. Let's start with the Knicks PR. They did something stupid. Tom, you're the most well-versed in that. Run back what happened to us.
Sure, we can talk on that real quick before we get into the basketball stuff, just because this was kind of just a needless distraction. But on Wednesday of this past week, the New York Daily News and Stefan Bondi, along with Nancy Dillon, his co-journalist there, they dropped an article that was just basically detailing James Dolan's efforts to try and redirect some business in LA. James Dolan, he is an owner of the LA Forum, where the Lakers used to play until 1999 when they moved to Staples Center. Now there are two teams at Staples Center, the Lakers and the Clippers. But the Clippers are trying to acquire some new land to develop their own arena. James Dolan doesn't want that to happen, I guess, based on this article. He's trying to use some of his influence to keep the Clippers from acquiring this new arena and from and hopefully playing in the Forum in his eyes. So after that article came out, it was a pretty, MSG came out and called it a hit piece. I'll just read the first sentence of it really quickly just to give you a sense of the tone. It says,
let's hear it.
Utilizing his bottomless wealth and familiar bully tactics, James Dolan has attempted to derail the development plans of a low-income city in California and influence its mayoral election from across the country. So he does kind of come across as like a Disney movie villain or something in the lead. But what happened next was MSG released a statement completely refuting it and just saying, it's common knowledge that the Daily News has a vendetta against MSG and all this stuff. And that's all fine. The MSG wanted to come out and refute an article. That's pretty common for a company to do if they believe a hit piece was run against them. The issue was the way MSG dispersed this statement was through the Knicks PR Twitter account, which just didn't make any sense. The news has nothing to do with the New York Knicks, and just kind of furthers this perception that Dolan is clueless and he's, just too involved in Knicks decision-making, and it hurts their reputation as a whole. And a lot of people would point to that and be like, well, that's why the Knicks didn't get any free agents this summer, because of Dolan and just the total just kind of clown show they have going on there. And this is just more evidence of that. So, it's a shame that Knicks PR had to go ahead and tweet that out, because if they didn't, no one would have even heard about this story. No one would even be talking about it. But here we are.
Just another remarkably stupid Knicks thing.
So I'll say over the last few weeks, I felt like the Knicks have kind of been making – and I don't know if they've been doing anything behind the scenes, but there has been a concerted effort to make the Knicks front office and management look a lot better. There's a whole Reggie Bullock thing, which I believe we're going to talk about a little later, but he's had some issues, and his agent came out with some great lines reported by, I believe it was Woj. Who was, does anyone remember the what he called Dolan? Something good.
There's a lot of flowery language. I remember that.
Yeah, they called the Knicks a first-class organization.
Yeah, and so he was very complimentary of the Knicks. And then Amari Stoudemire, who's also trying to make a comeback, he said that the reason he came to the Knicks to begin with was because of James Dolan. So again, very complimentary. Nate Robinson, another former Knick, came out and said that he would not play, or if he had a choice of New York or anywhere, he would stay in New York, or he would go to New York no matter what, because he loved playing there so much. So there's been a lot of these kind of little stories floating around, and I wonder if the Knicks kind of PR is behind them, or if this is just very coincidental happenstance that all of this good stuff is coming out about the Knicks after all of the stories about their dysfunction being the reason that stars aren't going there. Either way, that's all fun and good, and then this happens, and it's like you had all of this kind of goodwill going in your favor and moving you in the right direction, and then this kind of takes a step backwards. So, hopefully the other stuff starts to outweigh this, and you keep hearing more good things, and at some point they just outweigh the weird stuff like the story Tom just told us.
And look, there's a section of Knicks Twitter that looks at this story and they say the Daily News does have it out for the Knicks. They deserve this kind of retribution here. They think that the Knicks deserve to clap back. But and that's fine. I mean, if MSG chooses to do that, to respond, that's okay. The issue, again, is bringing the Knicks into making the Knicks a part of the story, whereas before Knicks PR tweeted, they were completely not a part of it at all. So, yeah, just wrapping up, putting a bow on that. It had nothing to do with the fact that James Dolan and MSG wanted to respond. It's just how they went about it. involving the Knicks.
The whole thing's silly because it shouldn't even have to be a topic on this podcast, but here we are. So moving along with more on the court kind of topics, we got two signings that became like officially official in the last 10 days or so. I forget exactly when everything went down. You kind of have to talk about them congruently, though. We're talking, of course, Marcus Morris and Reggie Bullock, because Reggie had signed on the first night of free agency to the 2-year, $21 million deal. A few days later, we find out he's apparently really injured. We now know that it's like a herniated disc in his spine or something. And that kept him and the Knicks from agreeing to terms there, but they decided to reorganize and come together on a different deal, which ended up in working out favorably for the Knicks and opened up cap space for them to sign Marcus Morris. So I don't know, Kenny, what are your thoughts there? Just rapid fire, whatever you got on that topic.
Rapid fire. The whole Reggie Bullock thing was weird, right? Like,
yeah,
because it just kind of came out like, oh, like there's some stuff going on. They're renegotiating the contract. Maybe he's injured. The original thing that came out was they don't know if he's going to be able to play the full season or something like that. And then nothing happened. Like we didn't hear anything until after the actual signing happened, and then we heard he had surgery to repair the herniated cervical disc or something like that. And again, maybe that's something in favor of kind of the Knicks front office and that all being kept quiet during that entire thing, just because I know that was a big thing for Kawhi. He was not happy with kind of how much stuff got out. But again, that's getting a little off topic. The Reggie Bullock signing, I think we talked about it a lot when it was originally announced that they had agreed to terms. I think he's a good player. He's one of the few guys that the Knicks brought in that is both useful on the offensive end and not completely useless on the defensive end. So I think they said he's going to miss about a month of the season. That'll be exciting, or when he gets back. Marcus Morris, he's another one of these tough defender, tough just all around players, and I think he's going to fit in well. I haven't, again, like most of these guys, haven't watched a ton of them independently of when they played the Knicks, but when I think of him, I think of a solid defensive player and a solid tough screen setter and possible roller. So we'll see what he brings when he comes along.
Yeah, I'm going through his stats right now, and I guess one thing we keep looking to at all these acquisitions is how can they help the younger players develop? And oftentimes that's either as a playmaker or helping to space the floor. And obviously the Knicks signed a lot of power forwards. Marcus Morris is another guy who's ideally a power forward. So, there's a lot of LOL Knicks talk going on. We should also talk about the hashtag Say Knicks for Clicks movement that was going on earlier this week. That was pretty fun. But
that is fun.
But Marcus Morris is a guy who, in recent seasons, he's actually been hitting from three pretty well. In Boston last year, he took over 5 threes per game and hit on 37.5% of those, which is solid. But I kind of dug in a little deeper to see where those attempts were coming from. And just over 4 attempts per game were coming on catch and shoots, where he was hitting 39% of those threes. So when he's taking shots that are kind of like in the flow of the offense, when he's getting kickouts, he's hitting he's hitting 39%. That's really good. It's on his pull-up 3-pointers when he's taking them off the dribble. He takes nearly one a game, or he took nearly one a game last season, and he hit 31.8% of those. So that completely tanked his 3-point percentage. Otherwise, he'd be closer to 40%.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to dislike about the Marcus Morris signing, right? He's a really solid player. People forget that, just 2 years ago, back when, the most recent iteration of that Celtics roster started coming together and they went and traded for Kyrie and were planning to take the East. They went and they flipped Avery Bradley, who was a guy they loved, for Marcus Morris. And he was going to be, their lockdown defender, the guy who was going to cover LeBron. That's kind of a topic that came up in when Jake and I talked last week in the episode that will never see the light of day. But But he's like a genuinely good player. Coming into the season, he's kind of like what our second best player as far as like what we know we're gonna get from people.
I'd agree with
Obviously
that.
we want like, it to be clear that Barrett, Knox, Mitch, Rob are all better than him by the end of the year. But as far as what we know,
Maybe.
probably number 2 or something like that, right?
Yeah, I'd say Julius Randle and then Marcus Morris as the what you're going to get from those guys, like at a bare minimum.
Yeah, high floors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a two-way guy, Morris may even be better. But Randall's a better passer. He's shown a higher capability for passing when he wants to. So, yeah, that's a tough one. But they're 1A, 1B in my book, and those are both power forwards. So finding minutes for them, like maybe you're slotting Marcus Morris as a small forward, maybe Randall's playing some center, but that leaves you in a tough spot defensively. So I know we want to get to it eventually, but Fizdale's going to have some real tough decisions to make when it comes to allocating minutes with this roster. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it definitely gets pretty weird because even before the Marcus Morris thing, people were clowning on us for signing 4 guys who would be listed as power forwards between Brandel, Taj Gibson, Bobby Portis. I think I'm missing somebody, but there's a bunch of guys whose the primary spot would be the 4. Now it's a lot of guys who can slide up to the 5 or a couple guys who can go to the 3, but then you bring in Marcus Morris and it becomes actually pretty funny. And on top of that, we have all these young guys in the system. So you got to figure out, are we going to play the young guys and focus on developing everybody before trying to win games? Are we trying to kind of win a bunch of games, get the good vets in, go for a playoff spot? It gets weird.
And that's what I'm kind of wondering, Kenny. Just real quick, I'm wondering how secure is Fizdale's job? If he feels extremely comfortable with his job security, he'd probably lean towards playing the younger guys and developing these players long term, right? I'm talking about guys like Kevin Knox, RJ Barrett. I mean, even Dennis Smith Jr. versus Elfrid Payton, right? Like DSJ has a much higher ceiling, but Elfrid Payton's probably the better player today. What's your ceiling if you're playing mostly these veterans? I still don't think the Knicks would be a playoff team. I think they'd be looking at 34, 35, 36 wins. Maybe a couple more than that, but I don't know. It's a tough decision between balancing looking out towards the future versus trying to win this season. I know a lot of teams struggle with this, but the Knicks have a pretty unique roster.
Yeah, and so I think that there is a plan here that we don't really know about. And my guess would be, to start the season at least, they're just going to play the best players and the minutes will figure themselves out. And once we get a little bit into the season, anyone who has trade value is going to get moved. So maybe some of the younger guys will be more hesitant to move, but anyone, that they just signed that's on one of these kind of 1-and-1 type deals is going to get moved. And then they're going to bring back probably draft assets, if I were to guess, and the minutes will figure themselves out. That's how I think this is all going to shake out. I don't know what you guys think about that.
It's the type of thing that's kind of it'll solve itself throughout the year. We already have one injury. Bullock's going to be out a month, but other guys will get banged up, miss games here and there. And then especially the longer the season goes, the more likely some of these guys are to get moved off in trades. In a lot of cases, it won't be as big a juggling act as maybe we think it is, but we are dealing with a team that's got 15 guys under contract that really do deserve NBA minutes to some degree, unless you watch Frank and realize he's kind of really bad. But
and that's the problem, though. If we're talking about guys who deserve NBA minutes, Kevin Knox, just in terms of his impact last season, was one of the worst players in the league. Not to say he didn't show a great deal of promise, or especially on the offensive end. And it's just he's going to be 20 years old this season. He's still not going to probably be a positive impact player. There are going to be other guys on the roster that if you want to win games, you'll play them over Kevin Knox. But if you're a Knicks fan, I feel like you don't want Kevin Knox's minutes to be cut at the expense of one of these other guys who's on a one-year deal, right? Like Kevin Knox, you're hoping is kind of the future, whereas Marcus Morris is on a one-year deal. Marcus Morris will help you win games a lot more than Kevin Knox will, but he's kind of like a hired gun at this point. Kevin Knox, we're hoping, will be more of a long-term answer.
I think a few years ago, in college basketball, Missouri was just making wholesale changes every game. So, like, every player played like 20 minutes a game. And maybe that's what we do, just keep everyone's minutes down. Last year, Kevin Knox got tired at the end of the year, too many minutes. He really slowed down. This year, everyone's going to get 20 minutes. How about that?
Keep everyone fresh.
Yeah.
It's also going to be because we can only have 12 guys active a night, so 3 guys have to be like inactive all the time. So even a guy like Iggy Brazdeikis, who we haven't talked a ton about, but he really lit up summer league, he's gonna probably get a lot of time in the G League, even though he showed enough that in most fans' eyes he deserves to be playing in the NBA. But he's probably gonna be shoved in the G League a little bit, which might be good for his development. Yeah, it's gonna get weird with these guys.
I mean, and those kind of conundrums are all over the roster. Like you could say the same thing about Damian Dotson and RJ Barrett. Like Dotson showed last year he could be a very good player on such a reasonable contract.
He's one of our more efficient players for stretches of the season. For
sure. And RJ Barrett, like Knicks fans are going to be hungry to see him get a lot of minutes and show what he can do in a year that the Knicks aren't going to make the playoffs, right? So like the question becomes, are you going to not make the playoffs and win like 37 games, or are you going to not make the playoffs and win 27 games? That's kind of the question in my mind at this point. Versus, and it all depends on how these minutes are dispersed.
And I was only kind of joking about the whole Missouri thing because legitimately every night, if everyone there's enough minutes for everyone to play 20 minutes exactly, right? And we don't have a ton of very big stars who deserve, 40 minutes a night. Like, so you figure Randall and Morris might be closer to 30, but like there are a lot more minutes to go around than I think that we think there are, just because no one does it. And I think that's more of a chemistry thing and a more of a, most people don't have that deep of a bench thing. So I think like it's not impossible that this year's Knicks team is a little different from those teams, because like we're not playing for anything. And most of those teams, they're trying to kind of develop chemistry and have all of their players who are going to be playing in the playoffs like get together. Here, we're just trying to get everyone minutes and keep everyone healthy and get some development and potentially get some return on our investment. So don't count that out as an impossible situation.
I guess also just seeing who works well together, because some of these guys, if they turn out to be good, these 1-and-1 guys, we might want next year when we're trying to actually make the playoffs or something. So we got to figure out who we might want to keep and who, and figure out trade values for all these guys, because you want to get those guys minutes. And
yeah, I hadn't really considered this year as like a tryout for any of these guys on 1-year contracts or like 1-year fully guaranteed contracts. I know a lot of them have partial guarantees in the second year for like a very little amount of money, but I hadn't really considered that possibility. That's why I was coming into this season almost thinking like, does chemistry really matter that much for most of these guys? But if you do look at it as kind of a trial period, then it does matter more with coming from that perspective. So I don't know. It completely depends on your mindset. Are you a glass half full guy, glass half empty guy? I'm just fascinated to see. I know we're gonna be talking about this a lot. I'm sure the rest of the summer and as the season unfolds, but I can't wait to see how Fizdale, kind of answers this task. And
kind of to be clear, like I'm not expecting that that's what's going to happen. I just think that it's not an impossible situation that won't happen, right? Because I have no idea how this is all going to shake out. Because like we said, it's an unusual situation where we have this many players who all deserve NBA minutes. So it'll for sure be interesting to see what happens.
And we've seen it before where you need to give guys minutes if you want to up their trade value.
Yeah.
We said that about even Frank last season. He wasn't getting enough minutes, and when all the trade rumblings started happening around Frank, we're like, you were selling as low as possible on this guy because he hasn't been able to show what he can do on the court at all, or at least he hadn't been put in situations where he could be successful. So, yeah, I mean, here's hoping that some of these guys. I hope you're right, Kenny. I hope they do turn around and trade some of these guys before the deadline to contenders for teams looking to bolster their front court depth. Maybe someone needs an Elfrid Payton type as like a backup point guard. But I don't know. I'm hoping you're right.
And that's another question is how long do they wait, right? Because presumably there's going to be a lot of these teams looking for something pretty early on. Like the Lakers come to mind. I don't know how much in terms of trade of draft assets they have left to trade. But like there are teams out there who want role players to surround their stars with. And, it's a matter of, will we be able to get the most value earlier in the season, or as is usually the situation, will we have to wait all the way until the trade deadline before the values really kick up?
And I think it's going to help that kind of both conferences are more wide open than we've seen, right? So there are going to be a lot of teams who can talk themselves into being contenders as the season progresses. So, especially early in the season when everyone kind of thinks they're going to be contenders, you're going to have got teams like Indiana and in the East hoping to compete, and in the West you'll have guys like teams like Utah, Portland, like they all are going to think they have a chance to make a run this year with Golden State being having lost Kevin Durant and being depleted. So I like that the landscape is more wide open than ever, and I think that should up the value of some of these guys in my eyes.
And you never know. There's going to be somebody who gets injured, and a team might not be able to fill it up with another star, but they'll fill in with other role players, or a role player for role player substitutions there. So because everything's wide open, teams might be more willing to give up a little bit for role players more than we've seen in the last few years, where it's like we're not a role player away from beating the old Golden State Warriors, and now you might be a role player away from being better than the team that was in front of you.
Yeah. And this might be a little hot take-ish, but given the way that kind of free agency unfolded, and particularly with the Kawhi Leonard situation dragging out so long, and the Lakers, the piece coming out about the Lakers feeling kind of like jilted lovers, and after Kawhi asked them for a bunch of stuff, and then they feel like they delivered, and then he just left them. I feel like there's going to be a lot of kind of fear of missing out on any of these players that the Knicks have to offer. It's like, okay, they have these players. Who knows who's going to be available later? We know that these are solid players, and we know that they can make us a better team right now. I think there might be a decent amount of that. Like, again, this is a very unique situation, and who knows what happens, but I think that that's a possible outcome.
Similarly, we get into these situations because we're starting to figure out that the way the NBA economics works now and everything, guys are changing teams so rapidly in free agency. So if there's like, it's something like there's like 6 all-stars from 2 years ago that are still on their team or something like that. So teams are going to be probably less patient now as we're trying to figure out how all of these contracts and stuff work a little better to capitalize when they have guys that are, this good right now, because we might not have them for 2-3 years down the line, or, things just change really quickly circumstantially and guys want to walk or ask for a trade. You never know.
Yeah.
Sure.
One thing I'm going to be checking out over the course of the next few weeks is just like teams who made mid-season acquisitions that really helped them during their playoff run. Obviously, Marc Gasol is a huge one in Toronto, but he was an all NBA level, defensive player of the year caliber center just a few years prior. So I'm curious, like when you think about the archetype of players that contenders are looking at going into the playoffs, like you usually think immediately of the 3-and-D guy, right? Like someone who can play on like a Danny Green type, who can hit threes, who can defend on the perimeter, and can switch a little bit. And that's not really the type of player that the Knicks loaded up on this offseason. Not to keep piling on to get acquiring all the power forwards, but you have to think like how many teams are a Marcus Morris away, a Bobby Portis away, a Taj Gibson away from taking the next step in the playoff hierarchy. I'm What do you think, Kenny?
And so I think that just in the new era of you have a bunch of stars on a team and then you have no one else, like we saw the the Warriors, who had 5 All-Stars on their team, throw out the most ridiculous lineup in an elimination game to start the fourth quarter. And so at some point, some of these teams just need people who can play basketball, and the Knicks have a lot of people who can play basketball. Like we said, none of them are stars necessarily, but all of them are capable of playing basketball and are capable of kind of garnering minutes in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to hammer home that point a little more. It's not like we're sitting here as Knicks homers being like, oh, all these playoff teams are going to be clamoring over these dudes. It's not like that at all. Like I think we totally are clear-eyed about this and what the Knicks have. And even with that, like there should still be some demand for capable NBA rotation players who have valuable experience in some cases and guys who you just know can play during playoff basketball.
Yeah, these are guys who pretty much all of them can be rotational pieces on genuinely very good teams. We have, guys who maybe none of them are going to maybe be able to start for any championship team, but they're going to be able to come off the bench. Even like Wayne Ellington is a guy, if some team just wants a shooter who will be not a zero on defense and help out the bench unit a bit. He's on a pretty cheap deal. There's guys, nobody's really getting paid more than they're worth, except for maybe Taj Gibson, but that's only because the team that came together around him. It's kind of weird to figure out how he's going to get minutes on the Knicks, but we know he's a good player, and $10 million a year isn't that big an overpay for a guy like that. So no teams are going to be asked to take on like a huge contract and shuffle around salary cap too much. So the point is, this guys that aren't going to be hard to fit into the roster salary cap wise, and are guys that are going to be able to give you minutes in the playoffs.
Yeah, man. Some news that came out yesterday was Kyle Korver agreed to a 1-year contract with the Bucks, who are obviously a team who think they're like very close. They're on the edge of being able to compete for a championship. So, Wayne Ellington, I think, kind of falls into that Kyle Korver category of someone who can just like come off the bench and for short stretches just light up defenses, sprint around screens, create some havoc with the defense. And they are both kind of one-way guys, but there's clearly still a demand for players like that.
Yeah, you can be one-dimensional, but as long as you're, good at that dimension, there's room for you in this league.
Right on. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is anything else we need to talk about? Any Knicks talk?
We can do just a quick. I know Tom is a big proponent. I don't know the opposite of a proponent, an opponent of talking about summer league and I agree with him in many respects. It is largely useless. But I kind of look at it as an eye test situation where I just want to see what people are doing and what they're showing me on the court. Don't necessarily care all that much about the stats. But just the 2 people that I thought were most interesting were Kevin Knox and RJ Barrett. And I thought both of them, the last few games, Kevin Knox statistically wasn't that good, but I saw him doing a lot of things that I hadn't seen him doing previously. There were a couple plays where he just kind of bullied over guys. And, last year I think we talked about him having the frame to put on some weight and build some strength, and it looks like he's added a little bit of strength. And RJ Barrett, I tweeted out at some point that he was pressing in the first couple games and he was trying to do too much. And it looks like, they kind of gave him the ball and let him run the point guard, and he looked pretty good for the last few games. So that's pretty much all I have to say about summer league, and I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah, nothing. You can't take too much, out of what you see in summer league. But yeah, RJ is a guy that a lot of guys had their eyes on, especially since Zion sat out summer league and John Morant sat out summer league. So he was technically the guy who was like supposed to be the best player in summer league. But those first 2 games were rough. People were ripping him, and he responded to that pretty well and had a solid showing for himself in the last 3. So nothing more you could really ask for. If you overall told me that this was what was going to happen with RJ's summer league before it started, I would have said that sounds like as good as we could get, other than him being just like a dominant force for the 5 or 6 games, which would have been awesome. But
we'll throw out some fire takes, but for now, I think we'll just keep it short and sweet.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
sounds
good.
Sounds good. Mixtape.
Fellas, have a good week. Talk next week.
Absolutely. Have a good weekend.